guys, so we are going to follow along with this tutorial in creating a vector drawing so that you can get the basic mastery of the skills in vector drawing before we move on to our own individual projects. So you should have Photoshop open at this time and everyone should see a little stormtrooper on their desktop. The reason why I chose a stormtrooper is because it's a pretty basic outline and design. There isn't a ton going on, but it still has the basic shape of a face and person. So the first thing that everyone is going to do is open their stormtrooper, and then next we're going to go to Image, Canvas Size, where we're going to change the width and the height to 10. And then we want to make sure that our canvas extension color, which is on the bottom of the pop-up canvas size screen, is set to white. This will make your background canvas white. Great, so now we have a 10 by 10 image with our little stormtrooper in the middle. And the next thing we want to do is go to our layers panel, which I'm circling right now. And we're going to want to double click on the lock, which will pop up this new layer. I'm going to name this background image and press OK. So now that our background layer is unlocked, it means we can turn it on and off and hide it as well. So next we're going to go to the bottom of our layers panel and click create a new layer, which is the icon that looks like a page is turning next to your trash can. We're going to drag that layer, which is layer 1, below the background image layer. Next I'm going to double click where it says layer 1, which will allow me to rename the layer. It's really important in general to be naming your layers, but especially when you're doing vector drawings, you are going to want to name every single layer because you are making so many layers that it will get very confusing very quickly. So this layer I'm going to name white background. And then I'm going to go over to my toolbar where I have a little paint bucket tool. I am going to make sure that it's set to foreground, which if I look where my color swatches are, the white, which is closest to us and is in our foreground, is set to white. I'm going to click with my paint bucket tool, and now you can see in your layers window over here that the background is white, which is what we want. So, to create a vector drawing, you're going to be using basically only the pen tool. So it's a pretty simple concept. The pen tool allows you to create shapes. So you can essentially outline the shapes that you want to create, and it will create a shape that you will then fill in with a color. So that is how you make these digital illustrations. So I want to go to the Windows bar at the top of my screen where my mouse is currently circling, so it's top left. And I will see a box with 4 little points. That is the shape layers for your pen tool, and that is what you have to be on to make a vector drawing. So I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on that. And then we've already talked a little bit about vector drawing, but essentially when you are making a vector drawing, you're using the pen tool to lay down points along the outline or along the shape, and with those points you're bending lines. So this is all made up of lines that can be bent and points that dictate how those lines are bent. So that you can see, because I'm sure that doesn't make a ton of sense, I'm going to outline the mask or helmet of the stormtrooper. So I'm clicking and laying down my first anchor point, and the next anchor point you could either lay down very close, but I'm going to spread it out a little bit, and you can see that the line is very straight. As I pull my mouse, these 2 little lines with balls on the end of them is going to come out, and depending on how I move my mouse, which controls these little lines and balls, depends how the line is curved and really created. So I'm going to want to always point these little line and balls in the direction that my next anchor point is going to be. So I want the line to go along this edge of the mask, but I also want these balls to be pointed to the right where I'm going to continue going. So as I continue to lay down anchor points, I'm going to be bending these lines that is making our outline. And then I am also going to be thinking about where these little ball and line things are going. So I'm going to keep going around the helmet, and as I do so, I have to think about where the curves are. Now, there's something to be said about doing a vector drawing with very few anchor points, but especially for this one, you're going to want to use about the same amount that I'm using. Because there are so many curves with this masks that the best way to get all of the curves most perfectly placed is to have a good amount of anchor points. Now, as you can see, to get this curve lined up, this line to be around this curve, I'd have to be pointing my anchor point in a different direction than I'm going. So as an example, when I then went past it, it would be very hard for me to get this next line to line up. So that is why we want to have these ball and lines pointed in the right direction. So I'm going to have to go to Edit, Step Back, and make another anchor point so that I can continue with this, with the line and balls going in the right direction. So now, once I have outlined the whole helmet, to make the shape, to finish off this selection or shape, I want to connect back with the original anchor point, which is up here at the top. So I'm going to put my final anchor point there, and it has now created a new layer. In your layer, in your layer box, and as you can see, when I put my background image layer underneath that shape, it covers it with the color that it's filled. So let's say you didn't want your Stormtrooper's helmet to be white and you wanted it to be blue. How you're changing the color is at the top window. There is an icon called Color. You'd click on that once, and you can pick out whatever color you want it to be. But again, I want mine to be white because I'm making a Stormtrooper. So I'm actually going to keep this under my background layer for now because it will allow me to keep working. We can talk about some other strategies to work with your images in 1 second. So as I've been stating, you are going to want to name every single one of your layers. So where it says Shape 1, I'm going to double click, and I'm going to title this Helmet Outline. So now I have to complete some of these other shapes that I'm seeing. So I'm going to make the helmet, the eyes, probably this mouthpiece, and this other mouthpiece. I don't really know that much about Stormtrooper helmets, so forgive me with my titles. So to make the headband, I am going to lay my first anchor point down, and again, curve these lines so that I'm following along the helmet, or the headband thing. So again, I have a new shape layer, and I'm going to name that Headband. And now I'm going to try and work on these eyes. And again, I have two new shapes, so I'm going to name one left eye, a Lisa, and then one right eye. So then I want to make these little cheekbones. Oops. And as you can see, my ball is not pointing in the right direction, so I'm going to start over on this. Maybe I'll come from this direction. And again, I'm going to keep renaming the layers. So left cheekbone, right cheekbone. So now I'm going to try and make a basic shape for this little mouthpiece. We are kind of making a deconstructed version of the helmet, so I'm not expecting you guys to go into full detail. So for example, I'm probably not going to include these lines that are on the helmet. But as we move forward and gain more vector drawing skills, those details will be necessary. So now I'm going to try and work on this mouthpiece. So now I have all these layers, but I can't really see anything. I am going to turn my background image off, and I'm going to go through these layers. You can see that there's a basic shape and outline, but many of these layers are not the right color. So I'm going to click on the layer, and then click on the color swatch and change these layers to what I want the colors to be. So I want to make sure I'm highlighted on the right layer. So as you can see, there's the headband. And so you are going to want to click on the little square box so that you can change the colors. Otherwise, you're not really selecting the right part. Oops. And I believe you can only change one at a time. Okay. So now, as you can see, I have a basic stormtrooper. And it looks pretty good. Obviously, there are a lot more details in the stormtrooper mask. I could include these lines or these little squares up here, but for now, I'm not really going to. One thing I would like to show you is there are these shapes near our shape layer pen tool, and you can use these to make some basic shapes, but they are not really wonderful to work with. So to make these little, I don't know, like lights on his mask, I'm going to just click and drag out a circle. But as you can see, it's pretty hard to like figure out how your little shape works, and they look totally different. So if I make the second circle, and I'm like, wow, that is a nice looking circle, I can drag that layer down to the new layer button and make a copy. And then I can actually, oops, wrong one, move over the copy to this other side. So if I want to turn a layer off and I don't want to see it anymore, I'm going to click on the eyeball, and now it's disappeared. And now I have two matching little circles, which I am again going to rename the layer. So you can name these layers whatever you want, but I suggest naming them something that will make them easily identifiable, like mouthpiece and top mouthpiece. So let's say you don't want to hide behind your background image and you need to see a little bit more. So what we can actually do is drag our background image to the bottom. And then if you select your layers, so let's say we're going to select all of these. You can turn your opacity, which is on the top of your layer panel, down, and so if something is opaque, you cannot see it. So if you're making your opacity lower, you're going to be able to see through it. So when it's set at 100, you have your basic outline and it's filled in with color and it looks good. But if you want to know that you've done those shapes, but then want to keep working and try and play around with some of these other details, you can turn your opacity down. So that is just one alternative to having your background image layer on top of your layers. So after you follow this tutorial, you should end up with, at minimum, a stormtrooper dude looking like this. If you want to go above and beyond and add some more details, I am more than happy to have you do that. I would love for you to gain as much vector drawing skills as possible before we move on to the next part of our project. But after you've made your deconstructed stormtrooper, we're going to go to File, Save As. We're going to name it after ourselves. Madeline is my full name. And we're going to name it Stormtrooper Vector Drawing. And you want to save it as a PSD, which you'll see format, and it will say Photoshop. That's how you're saving it as a PSD. And then you want to save it on your hard drive. So then you press OK, and the image should be either on your desktop or on your hard drive. I saved it somewhere on my hard drive. It's around. I'll find it. But make sure that you're saving yours on your desktop, actually. So when you're done with this, you can come talk to me and we'll go over the next part of the project. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Peace.